Imagine sitting down to the very last meal Julius Caesar ever ate, the same flavors, the same aromas, the same experience that filled his senses on the night before his assassination. What would it taste like? Would it be savory, strange, or surprisingly familiar? For centuries, these questions have lingered like ghosts in the pages of history, locked away in ancient texts and fragmented records. But today that changes. We're not just reading about Roman food, we're bringing it back to life. Welcome to a journey unlike any other, where history leaps off the page and sizzles in the pan. In this video, we've done something extraordinary. We've gathered authentic, centuries-old recipes from one of the most famous culinary texts of the ancient world, Apicius's Re Coquinaria, and we're preparing them exactly as they were written. No modern twists, no substitutions unless absolutely necessary. This is a true culinary archaeology experiment, and you're invited to pull up a chair and taste the past with us. From garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce Romans slathered on everything, to succulent roast dormice and honeyed wine, we're diving deep into the pantry of an empire. But this isn't just about satisfying curiosity, it's about connection. Food is one of the most intimate ways to understand a culture, to step into the sandals of people who lived 2,000 years ago and experience a slice of their daily lives. What did they cherish? What made their celebrations special? How did their flavors shape history itself? Together, we'll explore not just recipes, but stories of power, pleasure, and the timeless human desire to gather, feast, and remember. So join us as we fire up the stove, uncork the wine, and embark on a delicious and sometimes daring adventure into the heart of ancient Rome. Now, to bring these ancient flavors to our modern kitchens, we turn to the only surviving cookbook from that era, a text known as Re Coquinaria, on the subject of cooking. This collection of recipes is our single most important window into the Roman culinary world, a mysterious document that has fascinated historians and chefs for centuries. But using it is not as simple as following a modern cookbook. The pages of Apicius are filled with cryptic instructions that assume you already possess a lifetime of cooking knowledge. Measurements are almost never given. A recipe might simply call for a little pepper or a sufficient quantity of honey, leaving us to guess what that meant to a Roman chef 2,000 years ago. The instructions are terse and often lack crucial details like cooking times or temperatures, forcing us to become culinary detectives, piecing together the method from fragments of text and archaeological clues. And then there's the man or the myth behind the name, Apicius. The book is attributed to him, but who was he? The name itself was a byword for extreme gourmet excess in ancient Rome, almost a title given to the most lavish of foodies. There are stories of a man named Marcus Gavius Apicius who lived during the reign of Tiberius, a man so obsessed with fine dining that he reportedly spent a colossal fortune on his palate, and upon realizing his funds were dwindling to a mere paltry sum, chose to take his own life rather than face a future of merely average meals. But is this the same Apicius? The text we have appears to be a compilation, a collection that was likely edited and added to over hundreds of years, a collective work of many unknown chefs and scribes. So the book is not the work of a single man, but rather a culinary tradition captured on parchment, a testament to the sophisticated and complex world of Roman cuisine that we are only beginning to truly understand. To embark on this culinary time travel, our first and greatest challenge was sourcing a Roman pantry. The recipes in Apicius are not just lists of instructions, they are built on a foundation of flavors completely foreign to the modern supermarket. Recreating them required us to become historical detectives, tracking down obscure ingredients and, when necessary, finding the closest possible equivalents. This was a massive undertaking, a global scavenger hunt for tastes that have largely vanished from our world. The most iconic of these Roman flavors is garum, the fermented fish sauce that was the universal seasoning of the ancient world, a condiment as ubiquitous as ketchup or soy sauce is today. We couldn't simply use a modern Thai or Vietnamese fish sauce, as the Roman process was distinct, often involving fermenting whole small fish like mackerel or anchovies in salt for months under the sun. We sought out a colatura di Alisai from Italy, a direct descendant of garum, made in a few coastal towns using methods that have remained unchanged for millennia. This liquid gold is intensely savory, packing a powerful umami punch that truly forms the salty, funky backbone of Roman cuisine. Then we encountered our first true historical roadblock, Silphium. This plant, a type of giant fennel that grew only along a narrow stretch of the North African coast, was the Romans' most cherished spice. They used its resin and root for medicine and its stalk and heart for cooking, praising its complex flavor that was something between a frittata, celery, and garlic. It was so valuable that its image was stamped on coins, and Roman accounts describe it being harvested to extinction by the 1st century AD, likely due to over-harvesting and climate change. Its loss is one of history's great culinary tragedies. To replace this irreplaceable flavor, we turn to its closest relative, a frittata, a pungent resin known as devil's dung in its raw form, but that when cooked in oil, mellows into a savory, garlic onion flavor that beautifully approximates what ancient texts suggest Silphium tasted like. For herbal notes, we found a wonderfully authentic substitute in lovage. This hardy perennial herb with its deep green leaves has a taste that is like supercharged celery and parsley combined. It grows in many gardens today and was a staple in Roman cooking, providing a fresh, pungent green flavor that cuts through the richness of meat and fish dishes. We used it liberally, both fresh and dried, to channel that authentic garden, fresh Roman taste. And for sweetness, the Romans didn't have refined sugar. Their primary sweetener was defrutum or sapa, a syrup made by slowly boiling down grape must, freshly crushed grape juice, by half or even 2/3. This process not only concentrated the sugars, but also, alarmingly to us today, concentrated lead particles from the lead pots it was traditionally reduced in, which some historians believe contributed to lead poisoning among the Roman elite. We opted for a safer stainless steel pot to create our own defrutum, simmering organic grape juice for hours until it transformed into a thick, tangy, and complex syrup with notes of caramel and fruit that is far more interesting than simple sugar. We also sought out ancient grain varieties like spelt and emmer, grains the Romans would have known well, to bake the bread that would have accompanied every meal. Each ingredient was a puzzle piece, and finding it brought us one step closer to truly tasting the past. With our pantry carefully assembled, it was time to put these ancient recipes to the ultimate test, and we decided to begin not with meat, but with something that sounded deceptively familiar, a dish called Patina de Piris. The name might suggest a simple pear tart, but as we read the recipe from Apicius, we quickly realized Roman cuisine loved to subvert expectations. This was no ordinary dessert. The instructions called for boiled and cored pears to be mashed and mixed with pepper, cumin, a generous pour of honey, several eggs, a splash of wine, and perhaps most shockingly to a modern palate, a spoonful of garum, that powerful, salty fermented fish sauce. Our initial reaction was a mix of curiosity and sheer disbelief. Fruit, fish sauce, and pungent spices, this bizarre combination seemed to defy every culinary principle we know today. Interpreting the method was our first hurdle. The term patina itself is fascinating. It refers to a broad category of Roman dishes that were baked in a shallow pan, and they could be either sweet or savory. This particular one seemed to straddle that line perfectly. The recipe is incredibly brief, as most are in Apicius. It doesn't specify quantities, oven temperature, or baking time. It simply says to mix the ingredients and cook it. Based on the inclusion of eggs, we deduced this was meant to be a kind of set custard, or perhaps even a primitive souffle. We decided to puree the pears into a smooth pulp, whisk them thoroughly with the eggs, honey, and wine, and then gently fold in the ground cumin, black pepper, and that all-important, intimidating dash of garum. The moment of truth came as we combined these ingredients. The sweet, fragrant aroma of the pears and honey mingled with the earthy, musky scent of cumin and the sharp, pungent kick of black pepper. And then came the garum. A small amount was all it took. Its funky, deeply savory aroma cut through the sweetness, creating a complex and utterly unique fragrance that was neither entirely pleasing nor entirely offensive. It was just completely alien. We poured this strange mixture into a pan and slid it into the oven, completely unsure of what would emerge. Was this a failed experiment waiting to happen, or were we about to discover a hidden gem of flavor combinations lost to time for centuries? The baking patina filled the kitchen with a scent that was truly ancient, a fragrant mystery waiting to be solved one spoonful at a time. After what felt like an eternity of baking, the patina emerged from the oven, and its appearance was our first surprise. It hadn't risen into a fluffy souffle, but had instead set into a dense, golden brown custard. with a texture that looked almost like a moist, rustic cake. The top was lightly caramelized from the honey, and it held its shape firmly when we jiggled the pan. It smelled confusing. The initial sweet, fruity aroma of baked pears was undeniable, but it was undercut by this deep, savory, almost meaty scent from the cumin and the garum. It was nothing like any dessert we've ever encountered. The moment of truth had arrived. The taste test, with a bit of trepidation, we scooped out a small portion. The first sensation was pure, sweet pear and honey, warm and comforting, but that initial sweetness was quickly followed by a complex wave of other flavors. The earthiness of the cumin came through, not as an overpowering spice, but as a warm, aromatic depth that complemented the fruit. The black pepper provided a subtle, lingering heat at the very end, a gentle kick that made the entire experience more interesting. And the garum, this was the biggest shock. It didn't taste fishy at all. Instead, it amplified the savory qualities of the other ingredients, adding a profound umami richness that made the entire dish taste more rounded and complex. It was the same principle we use today in a modern kitchen: a pinch of salt in chocolate chip cookies to heighten the sweetness, or a dash of fish sauce in a bolognese to deepen the meaty flavor. The Romans were simply using their ubiquitous garum to achieve that same balance. Our reaction was unanimous. This was not a dessert in the way we understand it. It was something else entirely, a versatile dish that could have served as a starter, a side, or even a unique palate cleanser between courses in a large Roman feast. It was challenging, yes, but it was also genuinely delicious in its own unique way. It forced us to completely reevaluate our modern categories of sweet and savory. The Roman palate clearly appreciated this interplay, this blurring of lines where fruit could be savory and fish sauce could be sweet. This patina wasn't a failed recipe, it was a masterpiece of a different culinary language, one that prized complexity and balance above familiar simplicity. Tasting it felt like deciphering a secret code, a direct sensory link to a world that loved bold, contrasting flavors we've largely forgotten. Our second recipe offered a very different kind of challenge and a much more relatable flavor profile. Moving from the complex sweet and savory patina, we turned to a dish known as Moretum, a humble herb and cheese spread that was the ancient Roman equivalent of a rustic farmer's lunch. This dish is immortalized not just in Apicius, but in a beautiful and surprisingly detailed poem once attributed to Virgil, which gives us a vivid, almost cinematic look at its preparation by a poor farmer preparing his daily meal. It felt like a chance to connect with the everyday Romans, not just the elite. The ingredient list was simple and powerfully aromatic: a hearty bulb of garlic, a generous bunch of fresh herbs, specifically cilantro, and the pungent, citrusy herb known as rue, along with a sharp sheep's milk cheese, a splash of vinegar, a glug of olive oil, and a sprinkle of salt. The magic, however, wasn't just in the ingredients, but in the method. The poem describes the farmer using a mortar and pestle, and we were committed to doing the same, grinding everything by hand exactly as a Roman slave in a kitchen or a laborer in a field would have done centuries ago. This was about authenticity in process, not just in taste. We started by peeling several cloves of garlic and placing them in the heavy stone mortar with a pinch of coarse salt. The salt acts as an abrasive, and as we began to grind with the pestle, the firm garlic cloves quickly broke down into a fragrant, sticky paste. The sharp, pungent aroma immediately filled the air. Next came the fresh herbs. We washed and chopped the cilantro, its bright, citrusy scent a perfect counterpoint to the garlic. Then we carefully added the rue, a herb that is quite bitter and potent, used sparingly today but beloved in Roman times for its strong, distinctive flavor. Working in stages, we added the herbs to the mortar and continued to grind, crushing the leaves and stems into the garlic paste. The mixture began to take on a vibrant green hue, releasing the most incredible, earthy, grassy fragrance. Next, we grated in the cheese, a dry, salty sheep's milk cheese similar to a young Pecorino Romano. As we incorporated it, the paste thickened considerably, becoming denser and grainier. A splash of vinegar provided necessary acidity to cut through the richness, and a steady stream of olive oil helped to emulsify everything into a cohesive, spreadable consistency. The physical effort was real. Our arms felt the burn of the continuous grinding and mashing, a tangible reminder of the daily labor that went into preparing even the simplest of meals in the ancient world. The final product was a thick, rustic, fleckled green paste, We spread it on a piece of flatbread we had baked from emmer flour, and the taste was an absolute revelation. It was bold, garlicky, and incredibly fresh from the herbs, with a sharp tang from the cheese and vinegar. The roux provided a unique, slightly bitter, almost medicinal backbone that was strangely addictive. This was not a subtle flavor, it was a punch of robust, honest ingredients designed to satisfy hunger and energize the body. It was easy to imagine a Roman soldier scooping this onto his bread during a march, or a family sharing it as part of a simple evening meal. Unlike the puzzling patina, the Moretum tasted instantly familiar and satisfyingly delicious, a timeless combination of garlic, herbs, and cheese that transcends centuries and somehow feels like home. The transformation from separate ingredients into a unified, vibrant paste was nothing short of alchemy. After minutes of vigorous grinding, the coarse, grainy texture gave way to a smooth, thick, and incredibly aromatic spread. Its color was a deep, earthy green, flecked with darker bits of herb and cheese, a far cry from the uniformly processed dips we're used to today. We slathered a generous portion onto a warm piece of Panis Quadratus, the classic Roman bread we baked with a grooved ring around its center, and the moment of truth had arrived. The first flavor to hit was an unmistakable, powerful blast of fresh garlic, robust and honest, without the mellow sweetness that roasting or modern breeding imparts. This was garlic in its most primal form, the kind that would certainly linger for hours, but rather than being overwhelming, it was quickly balanced by the bright, citrusy punch of the fresh cilantro and the unique, intensely bitter note of the roux. This combination created a complex flavor profile that was simultaneously sharp, herbal, and deeply savory, cut through by the tangy acidity of the vinegar and the rich, fruity undertones of the olive oil. The salty, crumbly sheep's milk cheese provided a creamy base and a satisfying, granular mouthfeel that made the spread substantial and incredibly satisfying on the rustic, nutty flatbread. The immediate and perhaps most fascinating modern comparison is to pesto. While pesto relies on the fat of nuts and oil to create a smooth, rich emulsion, Moretum achieves its texture through sheer physical force and the binding power of cheese. It's less about richness and more about pungent, assertive flavor. It's also far more garlic-forward than any conventional herb cheese spread you'd find in a supermarket today. For a modern palate accustomed to milder, cream-based dips, the garlic level in Moretum is undoubtedly intense, but it's not unpleasant. It feels purposeful and energizing, a flavor designed to wake up the senses and fuel a body for hard work. This wasn't a subtle appetizer, it was a functional, powerful condiment meant to make simple bread into a complete and nourishing meal. Tasting it, you don't just taste garlic and herbs, you taste the ingenuity of turning a few humble garden ingredients into something truly memorable and delicious. But no ingredient defines the Roman palate more completely or seems more alien to us today than garum. This pungent fermented fish sauce was the ultimate culinary paradox, a condiment made from rotting seafood that became the indispensable foundation of flavor for an entire empire. It was in everything. It was their salt, their soy sauce, their Worcestershire sauce, their universal umami booster. Wealthy gourmands prized rare, aged varieties like precious wine, while common citizens used a cheaper version called liquamen to season their daily porridge. To understand Roman food is to first understand garum, so we had to confront this notorious ingredient head-on. The traditional production method sounds like something from a mad scientist's laboratory, not a kitchen. Ancient texts describe a process that was both simple and brutal. Small fish, anchovies, sardines, or mackerel, were layered whole in large vats with masses of salt. The salt drew out the moisture from the fish, creating a brine, and over the course of 2 to 3 months under the hot Mediterranean sun, a powerful alchemy took place. Enzymes and bacteria broke down the fish guts and flesh completely, liquefying everything except the bones. The mixture would be stirred occasionally, and at the end of this grueling fermentation, the resulting murky liquid was drained off from the top. This first extraction was the finest clear garum, a premium product. The thicker, sludge-like residue left at the bottom was a lesser quality paste called alec, often fed to slaves or used as a cheap seasoning. The scent of a freshly opened garum factory must have been overwhelming, a tidal wave of funk that would have signaled you were approaching a Roman town long before you saw its walls. We knew we couldn't authentically replicate this months-long process ourselves, but we were determined to get as close as possible. This led us to a small fishing village on Italy's Amalfi coast and to its modern-day successor, Colatura di Alisai. This anchovy drizzle is produced in the town of Satara using a method that has been passed down for generations and is believed to be a direct descendant of the ancient Roman technique. Instead of large open vats, the fishermen use small wooden barrels called terzigni. They layer local anchovies with sea salt, press them down with weights, and let them mature for at least 2 years in cool cellars. The liquid that slowly seeps out is colatura, a clear amber-colored essence of the sea. When our small bottle arrived, it felt like holding a piece of history. The liquid inside was surprisingly beautiful, the color of rich tea, and it moved with a viscous, oily weight when we tilted the glass bottle. The moment we unscrewed the cap, the aroma filled the room. It was potent and complex, an immediate, intense burst of the ocean, but not the fresh, breezy scent of a seaside walk. This was deeper, richer, more concentrated. It had a sharp, cheesy, almost nutty quality underlying the powerful, salty fishiness. It was challenging, certainly, but it also smelled undeniably savory, like the most intense Parmesan cheese crossed with an oyster. The real test, however, was the taste. With a sense of ceremony and no small amount of bravery, we dipped a tiny spoon into the bottle. The flavor that hit our tongues was nothing short of astonishing. The initial overwhelming sensation is a massive mouth-filling saltiness, but it's instantly followed by an incredible depth of flavor. The intense fishiness we smelled mellowed on the palate into a profound, savory umami that lingered beautifully. There were hints of dried mushroom, a touch of aged cheese, and a clean, briny finish that made our mouths water. It wasn't merely fishy, it was complex, bold, and incredibly savory. In that single drop, we finally understood the Roman obsession. This wasn't a condiment to be used timidly. It was a flavor bomb designed to elevate and transform everything it touched, providing a salty, funky backbone that made all other ingredients taste more of themselves. Tasting it straight was a shocking, enlightening experience, a direct, potent connection to the true taste of ancient Rome. After the bold, rustic flavors of the Moretum and the shocking complexity of the Garum, we were ready for our main event, a dish fit for the elite of Rome. We turned to a recipe called Pullum Frontonianum, a chicken dish named in honor of a celebrated orator and consul, Marcus Cornelius Fronto. This wasn't peasant food, this was sophisticated dining, and the recipe itself is a masterclass in the Roman art of layered, balanced cooking. The instructions in Apicius are deceptively simple, but as we read them, we realized they described a two-part process of poaching and saucing that promised an incredible depth of flavor. We began with a whole chicken as a Roman cook would have. The first step was to gently poach it, not in plain water, but in a fragrant court bouillon. Into our pot went a generous bunch of fresh dill, its feathery fronds releasing a sweet, grassy aroma. We added the white and light green parts of several leeks, sliced lengthwise to release their mild, oniony sweetness, and a hearty handful of fresh coriander seeds, which we crushed slightly to unlock their warm, citrusy perfume. To this we poured in a mixture of water and a dry white wine, creating a poaching liquid that was already aromatic and complex before the chicken even went in. We submerged the bird, brought the liquid to a very gentle simmer, and let it cook slowly, allowing the meat to become incredibly tender and absorb all those delicate herbal notes from the broth. While the chicken poached, we turned our attention to the true star of the dish, the sauce. This is where Roman cuisine truly reveals its sophistication. The sauce was a multi-layered emulsion, a carefully constructed blend of sharp, sweet, and savory elements. We started by grinding together a mixture of whole black peppercorns, dried lovage, that super celery herb we used earlier, and caraway seeds in our mortar. The aroma was warm and musky like an ancient spice blend. This powder was then combined in a separate pan with more white wine, a generous pour of honey for sweetness, a sharp splash of vinegar for acidity, and a good glug of our finest olive oil for richness. We simmered this mixture gently, letting it reduce slightly and allowing the harshness of the vinegar and alcohol to cook off, leaving behind a thick, glossy, and incredibly aromatic sauce that was both pungent and sweet, a perfect balance of contrasting flavors. When the chicken was fall off the bone tender, we carefully removed it from the poaching liquid, which had now transformed into a delicate, herb-infused stock. We placed the whole bird on a serving platter. Then, in a final act of culinary alchemy, We took several ladlefuls of that rich, reduced sauce and poured it directly over the warm chicken, letting the glossy liquid seep into every crevice. The final presentation was stunning, a golden brown chicken glistening under a dark, richly colored sauce that promised a symphony of taste. Carving into the chicken, the meat was unbelievably moist and fragrant from its herbal bath. The first bite was a revelation. The initial taste was the familiar, comforting flavor of perfectly poached chicken, but it was immediately followed by a wave of complexity from the sauce. The sweet honey hit first, then the sharp, tangy vinegar cut through, followed by the warm, earthy depth of the ground spices and the savory, aromatic finish from the lovage and caraway. The olive oil gave the sauce a luxurious, coating mouthfeel that carried all these flavors perfectly. It was a dish of incredible balance where no single element dominated. The sweetness, acidity, savoriness, and spice all played in perfect harmony. It was elegant, complex, and would not be at all out of place in a high-end restaurant today, a powerful testament to the refined and advanced palate of ancient Roman gourmets. The moment we laid the finished Pullum Frontonianum on the table, it was clear this was no ordinary roast chicken. Having been gently poached in that fragrant broth of dill, leek, and coriander seed, the bird retained a beautiful, pale golden hue, its skin smooth and taut. But the true transformation came from the sauce, a deep, glossy, mahogany-colored glaze that clung to every curve and crevice, shimmering under the light and promising an incredible depth of flavor. The aroma rising from the platter was intoxicating and complex. The initial sweet note of honey melded seamlessly with the warm, earthy scent of ground caraway and lovage, all undercut by the sharp, tangy whisper of vinegar and the rich fruitiness of olive oil. It smelled ancient and yet somehow entirely contemporary, like a dish you might find in a modern restaurant that specializes in bold, historical cooking. Carving into it was a revelation. The meat, having been cooked through gentle poaching rather than high-heat roasting, was unbelievably tender. The knife met almost no resistance, and the breast meat pulled away in juicy, moist strands that glistened with the reduced sauce. We served a portion with a generous spoonful of the extra sauce from the platter, ensuring every bite would be fully coated. The first taste was an explosion of contrasting flavors that somehow resolved into perfect harmony. The initial sensation was a bright, sweet hit of honey, which was immediately countered by the sharp, clean acidity of the vinegar. This sweet and sour combination then melted into the deep, savory warmth of the ground pepper, caraway, and lovage, creating a complex flavor profile that lingered on the palate. The olive oil provided a luxurious, smooth mouthfeel that carried all these elements, preventing any single one from dominating. The texture was the most striking modern difference. We're so accustomed to roast chicken with crispy, brown skin that this perfectly tender, softly textured bird felt entirely new. The poaching method resulted in meat that was succulent throughout, with no dry patches whatsoever. It lacked the Maillard reaction's roasted notes, but it gained an incredible juiciness and a subtle, pervasive flavor from the herbal poaching liquid that had fully penetrated the meat. The sauce was not a gravy in the familiar sense. It wasn't thickened with flour or pan drippings. Instead, it was a reduction, an intense, concentrated glaze that coated the tongue and made the flavors last. Comparing it to a modern Sunday roast is like comparing a rich, reduced balsamic glaze to a standard beef gravy. Both are delicious, but one is far more potent and complex. This was not a confusing clash of flavors, but a masterclass in balance. The Romans understood the principle of contrast in a way that feels remarkably advanced. The sweet honey wasn't there to make the chicken taste like dessert. It was there to heighten and complement the savory spices and the sharp vinegar, much like a dash of sugar can balance the acidity in a modern tomato sauce. The result was a dish that felt simultaneously familiar and exotic. It was clearly chicken, but chicken elevated to a level of sophistication that would be perfectly at home at a dinner party today. Tasting it, you could easily imagine a Roman senator reclining on a couch, savoring this very combination of tastes, a testament to a culinary culture that prized intricate, layered sauces and perfectly cooked proteins just as much as we do. It was a direct, delicious line to the past, and it was utterly magnificent. While the rich, complex chicken dish offered a taste of elite Roman dining, our culinary journey would be incomplete without exploring the food of the common people, the vibrant and bustling world of Roman street food. For our next recipe, we left the triclinium dining couch and stepped into the noisy, aromatic streets of ancient Rome to recreate a popular snack that has a direct and delicious lineage to the present day, Lucanicae or Roman sausages. This recipe from Apicius is wonderfully straightforward and feels instantly familiar. The ingredient list reads like a blueprint for flavor: finely minced pork, a generous amount of ground pepper, aromatic cumin, a healthy dose of garum for that essential salty umami kick, and a unique spice called baccamircia, which we know today as allspice or Jamaica pepper. The name Lucanicae itself gives us a clue to its origin story. It's believed these sausages were first introduced to Rome by soldiers or traders from Lucania, a region in southern Italy. They were a brilliant solution for preserving meat and creating a portable, protein-packed food that could be grilled quickly over a portable brazier and eaten by hand by people on the go, the original Roman fast food. Our process began with a large piece of pork shoulder. In the absence of a Roman slave to hand mince the meat for hours, we used a modern meat grinder, but we kept the grind coarse to mimic the rustic texture they would have achieved. The real magic started when we began mixing in the spices. We toasted whole black peppercorns and cumin seeds in a dry pan until they were fragrant and popping, then ground them finely in our trusty mortar and pestle, releasing their warm, earthy aromas into the air. To this spice powder, we added the ground allspice berries, which have a captivating scent that is a complex blend of cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. This fragrant mixture was then combined with the minced pork, along with a hearty splash of garum and a bit of red wine vinegar to add acidity and help tenderize the meat. Using our hands to mix everything together was a sensory experience. The meat was cold and fatty, the spices stained it a dark speckled brown, and the aroma was powerfully savory and inviting. Then came the most challenging and fascinating part: stuffing the sausages. We had sourced natural hog casings, which are essentially cleaned and salted pig intestines. This is exactly what the Romans would have used, and handling them feels deeply historical. We soaked the casings to make them pliable, then carefully threaded one end onto the nozzle of a simple sausage stuffer. Turning the crank by hand, we watched as the spiced meat mixture forced its way through the machine and began to fill the thin, translucent casing, slowly inflating it into a continuous, linked rope of sausage. It required a gentle touch to guide the casing off the nozzle and coil it without overstuffing and bursting the delicate skin. The rhythmic, mechanical process of cranking and guiding the sausage felt like a direct connection to centuries of butchers and street vendors who had performed this exact same task, creating a food that has truly stood the test of time. We twisted the long coil at regular intervals to create individual links, each one plump and promising, ready for the grill. With our Lucanicae links coiled and ready, it was time to cook them as a Roman street vendor might have over the fierce, direct heat of a charcoal grill. We lit the coals and waited until they glowed red hot, then laid the sausages directly over the flames. The moment they hit the grate, they began to sizzle and pop, their casings contracting instantly in the heat. Fat rendered out, dripping onto the coals and sending up fragrant plumes of smoke that carried the unmistakable aroma of toasting cumin, black pepper, and that mysterious, warming allspice. We turned them frequently with tongs, watching as they transformed from pale, plump coils into beautifully charred, crisp skin links, their surfaces blistered and dark in spots, glistening with rendered fat. They looked incredibly inviting, their appearance not so different from any high-quality sausage you might find at a butcher shop today. The scent was the first true clue to their ancient character. As they cooked, the air filled with a deeply savory, warmly spiced fragrance that was both familiar and entirely foreign. The cumin was immediately recognizable. That earthy, musky note was front and center, far more prominent than in any modern Italian sausage. Underneath it was the sharp, pungent kick of a generous amount of black pepper, and then something else, something unexpected, the sweet, complex warmth of the allspice, which added subtle notes of clove and nutmeg that mingled surprisingly well with the savory meat. It was a bold, assertive aroma that would have cut through the smoky chaos of a Roman street, calling out to hungry passers-by. We pulled them from the grill, their casings audibly crackling as they rested for a moment. Slicing into one revealed a coarse, juicy interior, deeply colored from the spices and speckled throughout with black pepper and flecks of herb. The first bite was a thrilling experience. The texture was perfect. A satisfying snap from the casing gave way to a juicy, coarse-grained meatiness. The flavor profile, however, was a journey. The initial taste was intensely savory pork, rich and fatty, followed immediately by a powerful wave of earthy cumin. This was not the subtle background note found in a modern taco seasoning. This was a primary flavor, robust and unapologetic. The black pepper provided a sharp, lingering heat on the palate, and the garum we had mixed into the meat was working its magic in the background, amplifying the savoriness and adding a deep, salty umami depth that made the entire experience richer. Finally, the allspice came through on the finish, a sweet, warming, almost baking spice quality that was completely unexpected in a savory sausage, but somehow tied all the other bold flavors together in a strangely harmonious way. Comparing it directly to a modern Italian sausage is enlightening. A contemporary sweet Italian sausage relies on fennel seed as its dominant aromatic, creating a bright, licorice-like flavor that is refreshing and clean. Our Lucanicae had no fennel at all. Instead, its personality was built on warmth and earthiness. The cumin and pepper provided a darker, more muscular spice profile, while the allspice added a unique complexity that feels both ancient and innovative. The garum, of course, is the total wild card, an ingredient we would never use in sausage today, but it provided a savory foundation that made the spices pop even more. The overall effect was a sausage that felt heartier, spicier, and more robustly flavored than its modern descendants, a taste designed to stand up to the bustling, noisy environment of an ancient city. This robust flavor and sturdy construction explain exactly why Lucanicae were the perfect Roman fast food. They are incredibly portable. A cooked link could easily be wrapped in a piece of bread or a leaf and eaten with one hand while walking through the Forum or watching the games at the Circus Maximus. They are nutrient-dense, providing a quick hit of protein and fat to fuel a day of manual labor or a soldier on the march. Most importantly, their powerful spicing would have served a practical purpose beyond mere taste. In an era before refrigeration, strong spices like pepper and cumin helped to mask any slight deterioration in the meat and made the sausage more palatable after being stored. Eating one of these sausages hot off the grill, you can almost hear the cacophony of the ancient city around you, the calls of vendors, the rumble of carts, the chatter of the crowd, and you understand that some pleasures, like a perfectly grilled sausage eaten on the go, are truly timeless. Of all the flavors we've worked to resurrect from the Roman world, one stands apart not just for its taste, but for its profound, haunting absence. This is the story of Silphium, arguably the greatest culinary mystery in history, a plant so fiercely loved and widely used that the Romans literally consumed it into extinction. Imagine a flavor so central to an empire's identity that its image was stamped on coins, a treasure considered worth its weight in silver. Poets sang its praises, physicians swore by its healing properties, and gourmets believed no dish was complete without it. And then it was simply gone, vanishing from the world by the 1st century AD, leaving behind only legends and a lingering question: what did this lost wonder truly taste like? Descriptions from ancient texts paint a picture of a plant that was as versatile as it was valuable. Silphium was a type of giant fennel that grew only along a narrow, arid stretch of coastline in Cyrenaica, in modern-day Libya. It stubbornly resisted all attempts at cultivation, thriving only in its specific wild habitat, which made its supply finite and its control a matter of state importance. Every part of the plant was used. Its roots were eaten as a vegetable or dried for medicine. Its stalk was consumed fresh, and its heart was considered a delicacy. But the most prized product was its resin, a sticky gum harvested from the stem and root, which was dried and sold in solid lumps or ground into a potent powder. This was the true essence of Silphium, the ingredient that found its way into nearly every aspect of Roman life. In the kitchen, Silphium was the ultimate flavor enhancer, a magical ingredient that appears in over 70 recipes in Apicius. It was used with a frequency that mirrors our use of salt and pepper today. A tiny pinch was thought to elevate simple lentils, enrich complex meat stews, and provide an irreplaceable depth to sauces and dressings. But its role extended far beyond the dining couch. In the medicine cabinet, it was a veritable panacea. Ancient scholars like Pliny the Elder documented its use for everything from soothing coughs and sore throats to treating wounds, indigestion, and even acting as a potent contraceptive. This dual role as both a supreme spice and a powerful drug made it indispensable, fueling a demand that ultimately sealed its fate. The combination of over-harvesting for profit, overgrazing by livestock on the land where it grew, and a possible shift in the local climate is believed to have wiped it out within a few generations. The last known stock was reportedly sent to the Emperor Nero as a curiosity, a final relic of a flavor that would never be tasted again. So what were we to do when our recipes called for this irreplaceable ingredient? Our mission to cook authentically faced its biggest obstacle. We had to find the closest possible approximation, and for that we turned to the one plant that historians and botanists agree is Silphium's closest living relative, a sapphitida. This resin, derived from a species of giant fennel native to Iran and Afghanistan, has been used for centuries in places like India and Persia, where it's known as hing. While not identical, the descriptions of Silphium's flavor, a complex blend of garlic, onion, and leek with a funky, savory depth, align remarkably well with the profile of a sapphitida. The moment you open a container of raw sapphitida, you understand why it's also known colloquially as devil's dung. The aroma is aggressive. It's a concentrated, sulfurous punch that smells intensely of boiled eggs and garlic, a scent so potent it can permeate an entire kitchen and linger in the air for hours. It's not an immediately welcoming fragrance. It's challenging and assertive, but this is where the ancient culinary wisdom comes into play. Just as garum transforms when cooked, so does a sapphitida. We purchased a solid lump of the resin, a pale amber-colored rock that we had to grind into a powder ourselves. The act of grinding released even more of that powerful aroma, a truly ancient and pungent scent that felt like a direct, if overwhelming, connection to the past. In keeping with traditional practices, we never used it raw. Roman recipes would have called for the Silphium resin or powder to be cooked, usually fried briefly in oil at the beginning of preparing a dish. We did exactly that, taking a minuscule amount of our ground sapphitida. A little truly goes an incredibly long way. We added it to a hot pan with a splash of olive oil. The transformation was instantaneous and magical. The moment it hit the hot oil, that offensive sulfurous stench mellowed dramatically, softening into a beautiful savory allium-like aroma, like the most perfect sauté of garlic and onion without any of the bitterness. The harsh edges smoothed out, leaving behind a deep, umami-rich foundation that formed the perfect base for our sauces and stews. This cooked flavor, warm and complex and utterly savory, is what we believe made Silphium so beloved. It wasn't about the shocking raw smell, it was about the profound, rounded depth it gave to food when used with skill. In that sizzling pan, we didn't just find a substitute, we caught a fleeting glimpse of the legendary flavor that an empire fell in love with and tragically lost forever. Moving from the savory, spiced sausages of the Roman streets, we now turn to a dish that epitomizes the sophisticated palate of the empire's elite, a recipe that perfectly captures their love for bold, contrasting flavors. Our next challenge is a dish called ius in elixum, which translates simply to sauce for boiled meat, but this is no ordinary gravy. The recipe describes a luxurious sauce for ham, built on a foundation of fresh figs, creating a sweet, spicy, and complex glaze that is both ancient and surprisingly modern in its approach. The ingredient list is a fascinating study in Roman balance. It calls for a cut of ham, which we sourced as a fresh, unsmoked leg of pork, as the Romans would not have had the smoking techniques common today. The sauce is where the magic happens. A generous quantity of fresh, ripe figs, ground black pepper, a dry red wine, a sharp red wine vinegar, a rich honey, and a generous pour of that all-important garum. The combination reads like a culinary paradox: fruit, fish sauce, and pepper. But by now, we've learned to trust the Roman instinct for layering these powerful tastes. Our process began with the ham. We placed a large piece of fresh pork into a pot of cold water and brought it to a very gentle simmer. The goal here wasn't to create a flavorful broth, but to gently cook the meat through until it was fork tender, preparing a blank canvas for the intensely flavored sauce to come. As the ham boiled, filling the kitchen with a simple, savory steam, we turned our attention to the figs. We selected plump, soft black mission figs, slicing them open to reveal their gorgeous, jeweled crimson interiors. Their sweet, jammy fragrance was incredible. The sauce preparation was a lesson in ancient reduction techniques. We combined the halved figs in a saucepan with a cup of red wine, a splash of vinegar, several spoonfuls of honey, and a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. We brought this mixture to a boil, then reduced the heat to a steady simmer. Almost immediately, the figs began to break down. their flesh dissolving into the liquid and transforming it into a thick, pulpy, purple concoction. The vinegar and wine provided a sharp, acidic backbone that cut through the cloying sweetness of the fruit and honey, while the pepper infused the syrup with a warm, subtle heat. We let this simmer for nearly 20 minutes, allowing the flavors to meld and the liquid to reduce by almost half, concentrating all those powerful tastes into a thick, jam-like consistency. The final crucial step was to push this fragrant fig pulp through a sieve, straining out the skins and seeds to create a perfectly smooth, velvety sauce. What remained in the bowl was a deep, opaque purple glaze, the color of a rich dessert wine. It was stunningly beautiful. We returned this strange sauce to the pan for one last addition, a generous tablespoon of garum. Adding this fermented fish sauce to a sweet fruit reduction felt like the ultimate test of our culinary courage, but we stirred it in with faith. The garum didn't make the sauce smell fishy. Instead, it deepened the color to a more serious mahogany hue and added a profound, salty umami dimension that made the entire sauce smell more complex and intriguing. By now, the ham was perfectly cooked, tender, moist, and pulling apart easily. We removed it from the water, let it rest for a few minutes, then carved thick slices onto a serving platter. The pale, simple boiled pork was the perfect contrast to the dark, glossy, and intensely aromatic fig sauce we poured over the top. The visual contrast was striking, and the aroma that rose from the platter was a complex symphony of sweet fruit, warm spice, and deep, savory undertones. The first bite was a revelation of texture and taste. The ham itself was incredibly tender and mild, providing a soft, yielding base. Then the sauce hit. The initial flavor was a bright, sweet burst of concentrated fig and honey, rich and fruity. This was immediately followed by the sharp, clean tang of the vinegar and wine, which cut through the sweetness perfectly. Then came the warm, lingering heat from the black pepper, a subtle spice that built with each mouthful, and finally, underpinning it all, was the savory, salty depth of the garum, which transformed the sauce from a mere fruit glaze into something profoundly savory and complex. It didn't taste like a dessert sauce on meat. It tasted like a sophisticated, balanced condiment where sweet, sour, spicy, and salty elements existed in perfect harmony. The Romans weren't just combining random ingredients. They were masters of creating multi-layered flavor experiences that engaged every part of the palate in a single, unforgettable dish. This was a culinary principle far ahead of its time, and tasting it was like finally understanding a secret language of flavor. Carving into the tender, boiled ham felt like revealing a hidden treasure, its pale, juicy interior a stark and beautiful contrast to the deep, mahogany-colored fig sauce we were about to pour over it. The sauce itself was thick and glossy, clinging to the spoon with a luxurious weight that promised an intense flavor experience. As we generously ladled it over the warm slices of meat, the sauce pooled around the ham, creating a visual that was both rustic and incredibly elegant. The aroma that rose from the platter was intoxicatingly complex, a captivating blend of sweet, jammy fig and rich honey, immediately cut through by the sharp, acidic tang of the wine and vinegar, all underpinned by a warm, peppery heat and that deep, savory whisper from the garum. It smelled unlike anything in our modern culinary lexicon, a true relic from a kitchen 2,000 years old. The moment the combination touched our tongues, it was a whirlwind of conflicting sensations that somehow resolved into a perfect, harmonious whole. The first sensation was pure, unadulterated sweetness from the concentrated fig and honey, a rich, fruity wave that was immediately balanced, almost challenged by the sharp, clean acidity from the vinegar. Just as the sweetness threatened to become cloying, the warmth of the black pepper emerged, not as a spicy burn, but as a gentle, aromatic heat that lingered on the palate. And then the true genius of the Roman palate revealed itself, the garum. It was the anchor, the foundational element that grounded the entire dish. It didn't taste fishy in the slightest. Instead, it provided a profound, salty umami depth that transformed the sweet fruit sauce into something deeply savory and complex. It prevented the dish from tasting like a dessert, and instead made it taste like a masterfully balanced main course where every element had a crucial role to play. The mild, simply boiled ham was the perfect canvas, its tender, unassuming flavor and soft texture allowing the sophisticated sauce to be the undeniable star. Drawing a comparison to a modern honey-baked ham is the most obvious starting point, but the differences are far more revealing than the similarities. A contemporary honey-glazed ham relies on the sweetness to caramelize and form a sticky, sugary crust on an already salty, smoky piece of meat. The effect is delightful but one-dimensional, a straightforward dance between sweet and salty. This Roman sauce, this ius in elixum, is in an entirely different league of complexity. It's a multi-layered emulsion where sweet, sour, spicy, and salty don't just coexist, they converse. The vinegar and wine provide a crucial acidic component that is completely absent from a modern glaze, which makes the Roman version taste brighter and less heavy. The pepper adds a dimension of spice that we would never associate with a holiday ham, and the garum provides a savory depth that is more akin to a rich demi-glace than a simple condiment. A more apt, though still imperfect, modern comparison might be the Italian classic of prosciutto e melone, where the salty, aged meat is paired with the sweet, fresh cantaloupe. Both dishes understand the beautiful tension between salt and sugar, but where the Italian pairing is about the contrast between two separate, distinct ingredients, the Roman dish is about the fusion of all flavors into a single, unified sauce. The fig isn't a fresh accompaniment, it's cooked down, concentrated, and integrated with other potent ingredients to create a brand new, complex flavor profile that coats the meat entirely. Eating it, you don't taste ham with fig sauce, you taste a completely new creation called ius in elixum. This exploration forces a fascinating conclusion about the Roman gourmet palate. They weren't merely combining flavors, they were engineering them. They possessed a sophisticated understanding of balance that feels remarkably advanced. The sweet fig wasn't used naively, it was a tool deliberately sharpened with acidity, warmed with spice, and then grounded with savory depth to create a sauce that engaged the entire palate in one single, unforgettable bite. It was challenging, surprising, and incredibly delicious, a testament to a culture that viewed food not just as sustenance, but as an art form of bold contrasts and intricate harmony. Tasting it is to understand that our modern distinctions between sweet and savory are relatively new, and that the ancient Roman kitchen was a place of fearless and brilliant culinary experimentation. While our previous dishes explore the complex sauces and spiced meats of the Roman table, no exploration of this ancient cuisine would be complete without its most fundamental element, bread. For the vast majority of Romans, from the lowliest slave to the emperor himself, bread was the true staff of life, the caloric foundation of every single meal. And the most iconic loaf of all, immortalized in the carbonized remains of Pompeii's bakeries and in vibrant frescoes, is the Panis Quadratus. This distinctive ring-shaped bread is instantly recognizable, and we were determined to not just bake it, but to understand the why behind its unique form. Our first task was to find the right flour. The Romans didn't use the modern high-grain bread wheat we're accustomed to today. Their daily bread was made from more ancient, hearty grains like spelt and emmer, also known as farro. These grains have a lower gluten content, resulting in a denser, more nutritious, and more rustic loaf. We sourced whole grain emmer flour, its coarse, speckled texture a world away from refined white flour. The aroma was nutty and deep, promising a loaf with real character. Then came the leavening. There was no instant yeast in ancient Rome. All bread was sourdough, leavened by a wild yeast starter captured from the air itself. We began this process weeks in advance, cultivating our own starter by simply mixing flour and water and letting the natural yeasts present on the grain, and in our kitchen environment, colonize it. We fed it daily, watching it bubble and grow, its sharp, tangy smell a sign of a living, active culture ready to raise our dough. Mixing the dough was a physical, hands-on process. We combined the emmer flour with water, a portion of our active sourdough starter, and a pinch of salt. Emmer flour behaves differently. It absorbs more water and feels stickier and less elastic than wheat dough. We turned it out onto a wooden board and began the ancient rhythm of kneading, folding and pushing the dough for nearly 20 minutes until it slowly began to transform, becoming smoother and more cohesive. We placed the dough into a bowl, covered it with a cloth, and let the magic of fermentation begin. Over several hours, our wild yeast worked tirelessly, feasting on the sugars in the grain and producing gases that caused the dough to slowly, impressively double in size, its surface domed and dotted with air pockets. The smell in the kitchen was incredible, earthy, sour, and alive. Now it was time to shape our Panis Quadratus. The classic ring shape isn't just for show, it's brilliantly practical. We divided the risen dough and shaped it into a tight, round ball. Then, using a length of cord, we tied a single loop around the center of the loaf, not too tightly, creating a deep indentation. This central divide is the loaf's most famous feature. Once baked, this groove creates a natural weakness, allowing the loaf to be easily broken into 8 perfect, equal wedges for sharing, a built-in portion control system from 2,000 years ago. But we weren't done. Using a Roman tool called a scalper, which is essentially a small, curved blade, we scored a series of deep, radial cuts from the central cord groove out towards the edge of the loaf. These scored lines aren't decorative. In a dense, low-gluten emmer loaf, they are absolutely essential. They act as predetermined weak points, allowing the steam to escape in a controlled way during baking and giving the loaf room to expand without cracking, open randomly, and ruining its shape. For the baking, we wanted to get as close to the Roman method as possible. Most Roman homes didn't have ovens. They would take their shaped loaves to a communal bakery. These bakeries featured large, wood-fired domed brick ovens. Not unlike a traditional pizza oven, we heated a Dutch oven in our modern oven to an extremely high temperature to simulate this environment. The sealed Dutch oven traps steam from the dough itself, creating the humid, intense heat of a brick oven that gives sourdough its fantastic crackly crust. We carefully placed our scored loaf inside, put the lid on, and let the heat work. Pulling the finished loaf out of the oven was a moment of pure time travel. There it was, a gorgeous, deeply browned, ring-shaped loaf of bread, its surface blistered and dusty with flour, the radial scores having opened up beautifully during the bake. It looked exactly like the bread depicted holding in the hands of a figure in a Pompeii fresco. Letting it cool was agonizing but necessary. The sound of the crust crackling as it cooled was like hearing the past speak. Finally, we broke it open along one of the scored lines. The crust was thick and formidable, while the crumb inside was dense, moist, and chewy, with an irregular, open structure and a spectacular nutty, tangy flavor from the emmer flour and sourdough fermentation. It wasn't light and fluffy like a modern baguette. It was a substantial, hearty bread designed to fill the belly and sustain a person through a long day of manual labor. Tearing off a wedge and eating it plain, we could instantly understand its central role in the Roman world. This was more than a recipe. It was a direct, edible link to the daily life of millions of people, a taste of the true ancient Rome. Breaking into the freshly baked Panis Quadratus was a physical experience that connected us directly to the past. The crust, hardened in the intense heat of our mock Roman oven, was thick and formidable, resisting the knife with a series of satisfying cracks. Once we applied enough pressure, the loaf gave way along one of the pre-scored lines, splitting into a perfect wedge, just as its ancient baker intended. The interior crumb revealed itself, not the uniform, airy white of modern bread, but something far more substantial. The emmer flour created a dense, moist, and chewy texture, with an irregular, open structure full of tiny holes and a beautiful, speckled brown color from the whole grain. The aroma that burst forth was deep and complex, a pronounced tang from the wild sourdough starter, underpinned by a profoundly nutty, almost earthy scent from the ancient grain itself. The taste was a revelation of simplicity and sustenance. That first plain bite was a journey from sharp to sweet. The initial tang of the sourdough hit immediately, followed by the rich, weedy flavor of the emmer, which finished with a subtle, natural sweetness. The crust added a wonderful textural contrast, a hearty crunch that gave way to the soft, satisfying chew of the crumb. Comparing it directly to a loaf of modern, commercial white bread is like comparing a rugged, hand-hewn timber to a particle board sheet. Our supermarket bread is engineered for softness, sweetness, and a long shelf life, its flavor often relying on added fats and sugars. This ancient loaf was the opposite, robust, minimally processed, and entirely reliant on the inherent character of its grain and the magic of natural fermentation for its flavor. It wasn't designed to be eaten alone as a snack. It was a functional, nutrient-dense foundation, a tool for carrying other foods and fueling the body for hours of hard work. To truly complete the experience, we slathered a generous portion of our freshly made Moretum onto a warm wedge of the bread. The combination was nothing short of culinary time travel. The thick, garlicky, herb-flecked paste clung to the coarse crumb of the emmer bread perfectly. With one bite, the bold, pungent flavors of the cheese and herbs were instantly tempered and balanced by the mild, tangy, nutty notes of the bread. The Moretum provided the powerful, savory punch, while the Panis Quadratus provided the hearty, filling bulk. It was a perfect symbiotic relationship of flavors and textures, a complete and utterly satisfying meal that required nothing else. In that moment, we understood the Roman phrase, panem et circenses, bread and circuses, not as a cynical critique, but as a stark acknowledgement of reality. For the vast majority of Romans, this was the meal. A loaf of bread and a simple, potent spread like Moretum or a dip of Garum could constitute breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a soldier, a laborer, or a slave. This humble combination was the true staff of life, the caloric engine that built the roads, manned the legions, and sustained the population of an empire. Tasting them together, we weren't just sampling recipes, we were sharing the most fundamental daily sustenance of the ancient world. After exploring the robust world of sausages and the foundational importance of bread, we arrive at a dish that perfectly showcases the Roman culinary philosophy of elegant, layered complexity. We return to the patina, but this time we venture into savory territory with a recipe called Patina de Asparagis. If our first patina with pears was a puzzling blend of sweet and savory, this asparagus version is a masterclass in refined, custardy elegance, a dish that beautifully blurs the lines between a fluffy omelet, a savory custard, and a sophisticated vegetable terrine. The recipe in Apicius is, as always, wonderfully concise yet packed with flavor. It instructs us to take cooked asparagus and layer it in a dish, then pour over it a mixture of eggs, pepper, lovage, fresh cilantro, a bit of onion, and of course, a generous pour of that all-important garum. The method itself is simple, but the combination of these specific ingredients promises a depth of flavor that is anything but basic. This patina was likely a staple at finer Roman tables, a versatile dish that could be served as a starter, a light main course, or part of a larger spread of appetizers. Our process began with the star ingredient, beautiful fresh asparagus. We trimmed the tough ends and gave them a quick boil in salted water until they were just tender, crisp, vibrant green, and still full of their characteristic earthy sweetness. While they cooled, we turned to the custard base. We cracked several eggs into a bowl, and here we faced our first interpretive decision. The recipe doesn't specify the number of eggs, simply saying, break eggs. Based on the desired outcome, a set custard that could hold its shape, we whisked them thoroughly until they were pale and frothy. Then came the seasoning, a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper for warmth, a tablespoon of finely chopped fresh lovage for its intense super celery punch, a handful of fresh cilantro leaves for a bright citrusy note, and a few tablespoons of finely minced onion for a sweet aromatic base. Finally, we stirred in a tablespoon of garum, trusting it to provide the essential salty umami foundation that would unite all the other elements. The assembly was where the Roman love for presentation became clear. We took a shallow ceramic dish, the modern equivalent of the Roman patina pan, and began arranging the blanched asparagus spears in a single, neat layer across the bottom. This wasn't just about practicality, it was about creating a beautiful presentation. Once the dish was inverted for serving, we then carefully poured the seasoned egg mixture over the top, allowing it to seep down and envelop every spear. The dish went into a moderate oven, and we watched as the magic happened. The eggs slowly puffed up at the edges and transformed from liquid to a solid, golden custard, its surface lightly browned and perfectly set. The aroma that filled the kitchen as it baked was a heavenly blend of earthy asparagus, the warm, aromatic scent of lovage and cilantro, and the deep, savory undertone from the garum. It smelled sophisticated and inviting, a world away from the challenging fragrance of our first sweet patina. Removing it from the oven, we let it rest for a few minutes. The custard had set perfectly, firm yet yielding to the touch. We ran a knife around the edge and carefully inverted the entire patina onto a serving platter, revealing the beautiful pattern of asparagus spears now on top, encased in their golden egg blanket. The first slice was a textural dream. The custard was incredibly light and fluffy, almost like a savory souffle, yet moist and tender. Each bite offered the satisfying, slight crunch of the asparagus against the soft, delicate egg. The flavor profile was an exquisite balance. The initial taste was the clean, sweet earthiness of the asparagus, which was immediately followed by the warm kick of black pepper and the unique, pungent flavor of the lovage. The fresh cilantro provided a surprising and welcome burst of brightness, while the garum worked its usual magic in the background, amplifying the savoriness of the eggs and vegetables without announcing its fishy origins. The minced onion had sweetened during baking, adding another layer of subtle aromatic depth. This patina is a brilliant example of how the Romans viewed eggs not just as a breakfast food, but as a versatile vehicle for creating elegant, structured dishes. It exists in a delightful gray area between a frittata and a quiche without a crust. It's more delicate and custardy than a frittata, yet more substantial and vegetable-forward than a simple custard. This blurring of culinary categories seems to have been a deliberate and cherished aspect of Roman gourmet cooking. They appreciated the technical skill required to transform simple, humble ingredients into something that was both nourishing and visually impressive, a dish that appealed to the eye and the palate in equal measure. Tasting this savory patina, one can easily imagine it being served at a sophisticated dinner party in a wealthy Roman villa, a testament to a cuisine that valued complexity, balance, and beautiful presentation just as much as we do today. Sliding the set patina from its dish was a moment of pure culinary suspense. The entire golden brown custard, speckled with green herbs, released with a soft sigh, holding its perfect shape on the platter and revealing the beautiful, orderly pattern of asparagus spears embedded within it like a hidden treasure. The texture was the first true surprise. This was nothing like the dense, compact consistency of our pear patina. Instead, it was incredibly light and airy, almost like a savory soufflé that had settled into a tender, quivering custard. Slicing into it revealed a moist, delicate crumb that held together beautifully, each piece offering a perfect cross-section of green asparagus encased in the golden egg. The flavor distribution was a masterclass in balance. The initial taste was the bright, earthy sweetness of the asparagus itself, which absolutely shone through and was not at all lost. It was clearly the star of the dish. This clean vegetable flavor was then seamlessly followed by the warm, aromatic notes from the generous black pepper and the uniquely pungent, celery-like punch of the fresh lovage. The cilantro provided a fleeting, citrusy freshness that cut through the richness, while the background hum of the garum and the sweet undertone of the sautéed onion worked together to create a profound, savory depth that made the entire experience feel grounded and complex. The eggs themselves acted as the perfect neutral canvas, binding these bold flavors together without competing with them. Drawing a comparison to modern dishes is inevitable, and the most immediate one is a frittata. Both are egg-based dishes that incorporate vegetables and are baked until set, but the differences are far more revealing than the similarities. A standard frittata is typically heartier and more straightforward, often with a higher ratio of filling to egg and a denser, more compact texture. This patina was ethereal by comparison, lighter, more delicate, and with a much more uniform, custard-like consistency that felt far more refined. The flavor profile was also more complex and intentionally layered. Where frittata might rely on cheese and perhaps one herb, this patina built its flavor with a careful orchestra of pepper, two distinct herbs, alliums, and the umami power of garum. A quiche is perhaps a closer relative in terms of its custardy texture, but it is defined by its rich, buttery crust and a filling that is often cream-based. This patina had no crust to offer textural contrast or buttery flavor, and it achieved its luxurious mouthfeel through the emulsion of the eggs and the natural moisture of the ingredients alone, making it feel somehow both lighter and more focused on the purity of its flavors. It exists in a fascinating culinary space all its own, a sophisticated, structured egg dish that prioritizes herbal complexity and vegetable celebration over richness and indulgence. Tasting it, you understand that the Romans weren't just making a simple baked egg dish, they were engineering a sophisticated vehicle for flavor, a testament to their advanced understanding of how to elevate the most humble ingredients into something truly elegant and memorable. But just as the Romans blurred the lines between sweet and savory in their main courses, their approach to ending a meal was equally nuanced and inventive. True to their love for contrast, their desserts or dolcia were rarely just about simple sweetness. They were intricate studies in balancing flavors and textures. In a world without refined sugar, the Roman confectioner's artistry relied on the natural gifts of the hive and the orchard. Honey was their liquid gold, the primary sweetener that found its way into nearly every dessert, but it was almost always paired with something to cut its intensity: a sprinkle of salt, a dash of pungent spice, or the rich, fatty counterpoint of cheese or nuts. We decided to explore two very different ends of the dulce spectrum. First, we tackled one of the simplest yet most brilliant Roman sweets, dates stuffed with nuts and rolled in salt. The recipe is almost minimalist in its elegance. We took plump, fresh medjool dates, their wrinkled skins hiding a deep caramel-like sweetness. With a careful slit, we removed the pits and replaced them with a single toasted pine nut, its buttery, delicate flavor a perfect match for the rich fruit. Then came the truly counterintuitive Roman twist. Instead of rolling them in more sugar, we gently pressed each stuffed date into a small bowl of coarse sea salt. The finished morsels looked deceptively simple, but they promised a flavor experience that would challenge our modern sensibilities. The first bite was a tiny revelation. Your tongue first registers the initial intense sweetness of the date, a rich, almost syrupy wave. Then you hit the soft, yielding texture of the fruit itself. But just as that sweetness threatens to become overwhelming, you encounter the toasted, savory crunch of the pine nut, followed immediately by the crystalline burst of the sea salt. The salt doesn't make the date taste salty, it performs a kind of culinary alchemy. It heightens the perception of the date's own complexity, curbs the cloyingness of the honeyed fruit, and creates a wonderfully savory finish that makes you immediately reach for another. It's a perfect one-bite representation of the Roman palate, a fearless play of opposites that creates a result far greater than the sum of its parts. This was not a dessert to be eaten mindlessly. It was a deliberate, sophisticated little treat designed to cleanse the palate and provide a final, memorable note to a meal. For our second dessert, we ventured into more complex territory with a recipe for globi, a fried pastry that was a popular street food and a common offering at religious festivals. Apicius provides a wonderfully straightforward recipe. Mix fresh cheese and fine spelt flour into a dough, form it into small balls, deep fry them until golden, and then immediately roll them in warm honey and finally in a coating of poppy seeds. The challenge, as always, was in the interpretation. What kind of cheese? The recipe simply says Cassius Resens or fresh cheese. After consulting historical texts, we settled on a ricotta cheese, as its mild, slightly sweet flavor and moist, grainy texture seemed the most likely candidate. We combined the ricotta with just enough spelt flour to create a soft, slightly sticky dough that could be rolled into small, walnut-sized balls. Meanwhile, we heated a generous amount of olive oil in a deep pan. While the Romans had access to other fats, olive oil was a staple and would have imparted its own distinct fruitiness to the fry. As the globi hit the hot oil, they sizzled and bobbed, turning a beautiful, deep golden brown within minutes. We fished them out, letting the excess oil drain away, their surfaces crisp and inviting. The final transformation happened in two swift stages. First, we plunged the hot globi into a bowl of warm, thinned honey, rolling them around until they were completely glazed and shimmering. While the honey was still liquid and sticky, we then rolled them in a bowl of black poppy seeds, which clung to the surface, creating a dramatic, speckled black and gold coating. The contrast was stunning. The first taste was an exhilarating rush of contrasting temperatures and textures. The exterior was a complex mosaic. The sticky, floral sweetness of the honey gave way to the satisfying minute crunch of the poppy seeds, which have a subtle, nutty flavor of their own. Then you bit through to the interior, which was a marvel of contrasting textures. A thin, delicate, crispy shell from the fry gave way to a soft, warm, moist, and almost savory cheese center. The ricotta provided a mild, creamy tang that balanced the exterior sweetness perfectly, while the spelt flour in the dough added a wholesome, nutty heartiness. Enjoying a globus is a wonderfully messy, engaging experience, the kind of treat best eaten out of hand with sticky fingers and a sense of joy. It feels both ancient and strangely familiar. The combination of fried dough, cheese, and honey is a direct ancestor of Italian dessert fritters like zeppoli or Sicilian asfinci. But the Roman version, with its poppy seed coating and its focus on the pure, unadorned flavor of the cheese, feels more rustic and honest. It's a dessert that satisfies on multiple levels. It's sweet, yes, but also savory, crunchy, soft, creamy, and warm all at once. It's a celebratory food, a testament to the Roman talent for turning simple, available ingredients into something that feels like a genuine indulgence, a perfect honey-drenched end to our journey through their culinary world. Savoring these ancient sweets is like unlocking a final, delicious secret of the Roman palate, a world where dessert was an art of balance rather than an overwhelming sugar rush. Taking that first bite of the salt-rolled date, the experience unfolds in three distinct waves. It begins with an intense, almost decadent sweetness from the rich medjool fruit, a pure and simple burst of natural sugar. Then your teeth find the hidden treasure inside, the toasted pine nut, which introduces a soft, buttery crunch and a savory, earthy note that immediately cuts through the fruit's intensity. But the true masterstroke is the final act, the crystalline burst of coarse sea salt. It doesn't make the date taste salty. Instead, it performs a kind of culinary magic, heightening the date's own complex caramel notes while simultaneously curbing any cloying sweetness and leaving a clean, sophisticated finish that makes you instantly reach for another. This is the Roman dolce philosophy in a single, perfect bite, the deliberate, brilliant play of opposites creating a result far greater than the sum of its parts. Then we turn to the globi, the fried cheese pastries, and the experience was a joyful, multisensory adventure. Lifting one from the platter, it's immediately clear this is a treat to be eaten with your hands, embracing the delightful mess. The exterior is a complex mosaic of textures. Your fingers first meet the sticky, floral warmth of the honey glaze, which is then covered in a coat of tiny, black poppy seeds that offer a satisfying, minute crunch and a subtle, nutty flavor. Biting through that crisp, seeded shell reveals the stunning interior. A thin, delicate fried crust gives way to a soft, warm, and remarkably moist center of ricotta cheese that is somehow both savory and sweet. The mild, creamy tang of the cheese is the perfect counterweight to the honey's intensity, while the spelt flour in the dough adds a wholesome, nutty heartiness that grounds the entire experience. It's bizarre only in its unfamiliarity. In practice, it's utterly brilliant, a harmonious blend of creamy, crunchy, sweet, and savory that is deeply satisfying and strangely addictive. This exploration forces a fascinating comparison between the Roman concept of dessert and our own modern expectations. We often define dessert as a course of unapologetic sweetness, a finale dominated by sugar, chocolate, and cream where the primary goal is indulgence. The Roman approach to dolce was far more nuanced. Their goal wasn't a sugar coma, it was a final, balanced note to the symphony of a meal. They used honey not to overwhelm but to enhance and complement other flavors, the savoriness of cheese, the richness of nuts, the pungency of a spice, or even the sharp contrast of salt. A Roman dessert was often a functional palate cleanser or a digestive aid, designed to round out the dining experience rather than bring it to a screeching, sugary halt. It was a thoughtful conclusion, not a heavy punctuation mark. Tasting these creations side by side, the overall impression is not of cloying sweetness, but of pleasant, intriguing complexity. The flavors are bold and balanced, each element playing a crucial role. The salt on the dates isn't a gimmick, it's a calculated technique to elevate the fruit. The fried cheese isn't bizarre, it's a masterful understanding of how fat, warmth, and sweetness can create a sublime texture and taste. These dolce don't just satisfy a sweet tooth, they engage the entire palate, offering a final, memorable chapter that is as much about sophistication and surprise as it is about simple pleasure. In these honeyed finales, we find a culture that cherished cleverness in the kitchen, a society that understood the profound art of balancing contrast to create something truly, timelessly delightful. But no Roman meal, from the simplest lunch of bread and Moretum to the most elaborate patina, would be considered complete without wine. However, the Romans would find our modern habit of drinking wine straight from the bottle utterly baffling. For them, wine was almost always a mixed beverage, a base to be transformed and enhanced. To truly complete our Roman feast, we had to venture into their world of onology and recreate two of their most beloved preparations, the simple, refreshing mulsum and the complex, spiced conditum paradoxum. We began with mulsum, the most common and straightforward of the Roman wine mixes. This wasn't a cocktail to be served at the end of the meal. It was the standard aperitif, the drink served throughout the first course to stimulate the appetite and prepare the palate for the food to come. The recipe is elegantly simple. Apicius instructs us to mix honey into wine until it is pleasantly sweet but not cloying. The key here is balance. We chose a dry white wine, something similar to the thin, acidic wines that would have been common in ancient Rome, lacking the oaky, buttery notes of modern Chardonnays. We gently warmed a portion of the wine in a bronze saucepan, the Roman metal of choice, and stirred in a generous amount of our own homemade de frutum, that reduced grape syrup, though high-quality honey would work just as well. We stirred until the honey was fully dissolved, Then let the mixture cool back to room temperature before blending it with the rest of the wine. The result was a revelation in its simplicity. The Moretum was a beautiful pale gold color. The aroma was immediately inviting. The familiar floral notes of the wine were now underscored by the rich, complex sweetness of the honey. The first sip was wonderfully balanced. The initial taste was sweet, yes, but the underlying acidity of the base wine cut through it perfectly, preventing it from tasting like a mere dessert wine. It was refreshing, slightly floral, and incredibly easy to drink. It's easy to understand its role as an aperitif. The honeyed sweetness would indeed awaken the taste buds and complement the salty, savory flavors of those first appetizers, like our Moretum or the salted dates. It felt civilized and pleasant, a gentle and welcoming start to a feast. Then we turned to the far more ambitious project, Conditum Paradoxum, which translates rather intriguingly to surprising spiced wine. This was not a simple mix, it was a deliberate multi-step infusion, a recipe designed to create an entirely new and complex beverage. This was a wine for special occasions, a celebratory drink to be shared among friends. The recipe in Apicius is one of the most detailed in the entire book, calling for specific quantities of pepper, saffron, mastic resin, and dates to be infused into the wine along with honey. Our process began by toasting whole black peppercorns and aromatic bay leaves in a dry pan until they became incredibly fragrant, their essential oils waking up and filling the kitchen with a warm, musky scent. We then transferred them to our mortar and added precious threads of saffron and a small lump of mastic resin. Mastic is a resin from a specific type of pistachio tree, still used today in Greek liqueurs. It has a unique, piney, and slightly cedar-like flavor that is completely unique. We ground everything together into a coarse, fragrant powder, a deep, reddish-brown blend that smelled ancient and mysterious. In our bronze pot, we combined a full amphora of red wine. We chose a sturdy, dry red like a Nero d'Avola, with a large amount of honey and several chopped pitted dates. We brought this mixture just to a simmer, then added our ground spice powder. The moment the spices hit the warm wine, the room was inundated with the most incredible aroma. The sharp, piney note of the mastic and the warm kick of the pepper rose first, followed by the luxurious, floral scent of the saffron and the deep caramel sweetness of the honey and dates. We let this simmer very gently for a long time, not to boil off the alcohol, but to allow the flavors to meld and harmonize, transforming the wine from a simple grape beverage into a deeply spiced, aromatic elixir. After it had cooled and steeped for hours, we strained out the solids, leaving behind a clear, deep, ruby red liquid. We poured a small amount into a traditional Roman drinking cup, a simple clay vessel. The aroma was intoxicatingly complex, a bold, spicy, and sweet perfume that promised a unique experience. The first sip was indeed paradoxical, just as its name promised. It was unlike any mulled wine or spiced beverage we have today. The initial flavor was the rich, sweet wine, intensely honeyed and fruity from the dates. This was immediately followed by a warm, lingering heat from the black pepper that built at the back of the throat, a sensation both surprising and pleasant. The saffron provided a subtle, earthy bitterness that balanced the sweetness, while the bay leaf added a herbal, almost savory depth. But the true star was the mastic resin. Its distinctive, clean, pine-like flavor lingered on the palate long after the sip was gone, providing a refreshing, almost cleansing finish that prevented the drink from feeling heavy. Tasting Conditum Paradoxum is to understand the Roman desire for culinary adventure. This was not a drink for casual consumption, it was an event. Each sip is a journey through sweet, spicy, herbal, and resinous flavors, a complex tapestry that unfolds slowly and invites contemplation. It's rich, potent, and strangely refreshing. Compared to the simple, pleasant Moretum, the Conditum is a bold statement of sophistication and flavor, a testament to a culture that saw no boundary between the kitchen and the wine cellar, and believed that even the most fundamental beverages could be transformed into works of art. Lifting the simple clay cup of Moretum to our lips, the first impression is one of surprising familiarity. Its pale golden hue glimmers invitingly, and the aroma is immediately pleasant, a floral honeyed scent that reminds you of a summer meadow, with the sharp acidic backbone of the white wine just peeking through. The first sip is smooth and deceptively simple. The honey sweetness is the first note to hit your tongue, but it's quickly balanced by the bright, clean acidity of the wine, creating a refreshing and incredibly drinkable beverage. It's not cloying or heavy, it's light, floral, and just sweet enough to awaken the palate without overwhelming it. It's easy to understand its role as the ubiquitous Roman aperitif. This isn't a challenging drink, it's a welcoming one, designed to stimulate conversation and appetite alongside the first salty bites of Moretum or olives. In many ways, it feels like the ancient ancestor of a modern Riesling or a Moscato d'Asti wines that use their sweetness not as a blunt instrument, but as a tool for refreshment and pairing. The Moretum is a testament to the Roman understanding of straightforward, effective pleasure. Then came the conditum paradoxum, and with it, the true paradox. Pouring it into the cup, its appearance is dramatically different. A deep, opaque ruby red, the color of a rich port. Bringing the cup to your nose is an experience in itself. The aroma is intensely complex and utterly unfamiliar to a modern wine drinker. The first wave is the luxurious, floral scent of saffron, followed by the deep caramel sweetness of honey and cooked dates. But underneath that is something entirely unexpected, the warm, musky punch of black pepper and the clean, distinct, almost pine-like aroma of the mastic resin. It smells like walking through an ancient spice market in a dream, sweet, spicy, and resinous all at once. The first sip is a journey. It begins with a powerful, rich sweetness, the honey and date flavors coating the tongue in a velvety, fruity embrace. For a brief moment, it tastes like a potent dessert wine, something akin to a modern commanderia, but then the paradox reveals itself. Just as the sweetness peaks, a distinct, warm heat from the black pepper emerges at the back of the throat, not unlike the gentle burn of ginger. This peppery warmth is followed by the unique, clean, slightly medicinal finish of the mastic, which leaves a refreshing, cedar-like sensation that cleanses the palate. The bay leaf and saffron weave throughout, providing an earthy, herbal depth that ties the entire wild concoction together. It is, without a doubt, the most complex and challenging beverage we've ever tasted. It is not merely a wine, it is a spiced elixir, a liquid artifact that defies all modern categorization. Comparing it to modern mulled wine is the most obvious starting point, but the differences are profound. Our contemporary Glühwein is typically a simple, warm red wine infused with familiar baking spices like cinnamon, clove, and citrus. It's comforting, predictable, and the spices are meant to complement the wine, not redefine it. The conditum paradoxum is a complete reinvention of the base wine. The spices aren't subtle additions, they are the main event, transforming the grape juice into an entirely new and potent entity. The prominent use of black pepper for heat instead of ginger or chili, and the bizarre, piney note from the mastic resin create a flavor profile that feels ancient, adventurous, and completely foreign to our sensibilities. It's less like a warm winter punch and more like a sophisticated, alcoholic spice infusion that you would sip slowly, contemplatively, perhaps as a digestive after an enormous feast. This bold experimentation reveals a crucial truth about the Roman relationship with wine. They rarely drank it au natural. Wine was a canvas, a base liquid to be altered, improved, and personalized. They mixed it with water for daily consumption, with honey for pleasure, and with elaborate spice blends for celebration and show. This wasn't seen as ruining the wine, it was seen as elevating it, customizing it to suit the occasion, the meal, or one's personal wealth. The conditum paradoxum is the ultimate expression of this philosophy, a beverage that celebrates the art of mixture itself. It's a challenging, acquired taste for a modern palate raised on pure varietals, but tasting it is to understand a culture that saw no boundary between the kitchen and the wine cellar, and whose idea of a good drink was one that engaged every single part of the palate in a surprising and unforgettable conversation. And so we arrive at our final moment of truth, the culmination of this entire culinary odyssey. We've gathered every single dish we've prepared, arranging them on a single table for a grand final tasting, a true Roman cena. It's a stunning, almost overwhelming visual feast. The golden ring-shaped Panis Quadratus sits proudly next to the glistening, sauced Pullum Frontonianum. The vibrant green Moretum and the golden brown Patina de Asparagis share a platter with the dark, glossy Is and Elixum. A bowl of Lucanicae, still faintly steaming from the grill, sits beside the perplexing Patina de Piris and the sticky, poppy seed-coated globi. It's a symphony of colors, textures, and, most importantly, ancient aromas that now fill the air, creating a fragrance that is entirely unique to this experiment. The most immediate and powerful takeaway from this entire spread is the undeniable, recurring theme of balance. The Roman palate was not about singular, isolated flavors. It was a masterful orchestration of contrasts. In nearly every single dish, we see this brilliant interplay of sweet, sour, salty, and umami, often all present at once. They weren't afraid of boldness. They used honey and reduced grape must not to make things dessert-like, but to provide a sweet foundation that could be elevated by sharp vinegar, grounded by funky garum, and warmed by pungent black pepper and cumin. This isn't a haphazard throwing together of ingredients. It's a calculated, sophisticated culinary philosophy. The garum is the absolute key, the umami engine that powers this entire cuisine. In every dish it touched, it didn't announce itself as fishy, but instead worked in the background, deepening every other flavor, making the spices spicier, the herbs greener, and the sweet notes more complex. It's the secret weapon, the universal amplifier that ties this entire feast together. Now for the final verdict on each dish, judged by both modern and historical standards. The undisputed universal hits were the Moretum and the Lucanicae. The garlic and herb cheese spread is a timeless masterpiece. Its bold, pungent flavor is immediately recognizable and satisfying, a perfect combination of freshness and power that feels just as at home in a 21st century kitchen as it would have in a 1st century Roman one. The sausages, too, were a revelation, their coarse, juicy texture and robust spicing, dominated by that earthy cumin and warm pepper, are incredibly familiar and delicious. They are a direct, unbroken link in the culinary family tree, an ancestor to the countless grilled sausages enjoyed across the world today. The Pullum Frontonianum and the Patina de Asparagis stand as testaments to the height of Roman gourmet cooking. The chicken in its sweet, sour, spicy sauce is elegant, complex, and would not be out of place on the menu of a high-end restaurant specializing in historical cuisine. The asparagus custard is a sophisticated, beautifully textured dish that showcases a remarkable understanding of how eggs can be used to create something light, elegant, and deeply flavorful. These dishes are hits not just for their taste, but for the sheer skill they represent. Then we have the fascinating, more challenging successes. The eosin elixum, the fig sauce for ham, is a dish that requires a modern palate to recalibrate. It is not a miss by any stretch. It is a complex, daring combination that is strangely compelling. The first few bites are confusing, but as you eat more, the logic reveals itself. The sweet fruit, sharp vinegar, and savory garum create a savory glaze that is challenging, yes, but also deeply interesting and ultimately rewarding. It's a hit for the adventurous eater, a stunning example of the Roman willingness to push boundaries. And finally, the Patina de Piris. This is perhaps the most challenging dish for a modern diner. The combination of pear, cumin, pepper, and garum is the ultimate test of the Roman flavor principle. It is not unpleasant, but it is intellectually demanding. It forces you to abandon all your preconceived notions of what a fruit dish should be. In its own context, as a versatile patina that could bridge courses, it is a success. By our modern, rigid standards of sweet and savory, it remains an acquired taste, a fascinating, bewildering, and unforgettable culinary artifact. So, to answer the ultimate question, would a Roman recognize this feast? Absolutely, not just recognize it, but we believe they would relish it. They would understand the balance in the sauces, applaud the skillful use of garum, appreciate the texture of the emmer bread, and savor the robust spicing of the sausages. They would see their culinary world reflected back at them in this spread. This experiment has proven that Roman food was not a primitive, crude predecessor to our own. It was a complex, vibrant, and sophisticated cuisine in its own right, built on a foundation of bold contrasts and a fearless approach to flavor. It was a cuisine of empire, reflecting trade routes, conquered territories, and a relentless desire to turn eating from mere sustenance into a true art form. Tasting it has been more than a history lesson. It has been a conversation across centuries, a shared meal with the past. And so here we are at the end of our feast, surrounded by the tangible, edible results of a journey that began with words on a 2,000-year-old page. This has been more than just cooking. It has been a form of time travel, a sensory bridge built not of stone or theory, but of taste and smell, directly connecting our modern kitchens to the bustling heart of the ancient world. To sit down and share a meal that Julius Caesar or a Roman soldier might have recognized is a profoundly intimate way to engage with history, moving beyond dates and battles to experience the daily life of an empire through its most universal language, food. What this incredible experiment has revealed is a cuisine of stunning sophistication and fearless flavor. The Roman palate was not primitive or unrefined, it was advanced, complex, and built on a masterful understanding of balance. They were orchestrating contrasts long before it became a modern culinary trend: sweet fruit against salty garum, sharp vinegar mellowed by rich honey, earthy spices cutting through the fat of succulent meats. While some combinations like the pear patina initially challenged our modern sensibilities, so many others were not just palatable but genuinely, surprisingly delicious. The savory, garlicky punch of the Moretum, the elegant harmony of the chicken in its spiced wine sauce, the joyful indulgence of the honey-globed globi, these are dishes that would stand proud on any table in any century. They speak of a culture that cherished the art of eating, that saw a well-crafted meal as a celebration of life itself. This adventure is far from over, and it doesn't have to end with us. The true magic of this connection is that you can reach across the centuries and experience it for yourself. You don't need a full Roman pantry or a sacrificial appetite for strange patinas. Start with something simple, something timeless. Whip up a batch of Moretum, grab a mortar and pestle, some fresh garlic, herbs, and a sharp cheese, and spend 20 minutes grinding history into existence. Spread it on a piece of crusty bread, take that first bold, garlicky bite, and tell us you can't imagine a Roman legionary doing the exact same thing 2 millennia ago. We are incredibly eager to hear about your own culinary excavations. Did you love it? Were you surprised? Share your results, your photos, and your stories in the comments below. Let's build a community of culinary archaeologists, all exploring the delicious, mysterious, and endlessly fascinating world of ancient food together. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this daring, delicious, and sometimes daring adventure into the heart of ancient Rome. Thank you for being curious, for being open to tasting the past without prejudice, and for sharing in the joy of unlocking this historical mystery, one recipe at a time. This has been an unforgettable journey, and we are so grateful you pulled up a couch to this triclinium and feasted with us.